Hey everyone, welcome back. I don't know about you, but I've been poring over Brad's latest report this week.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to digest. Trying to wrap my head around what this whole U.S. trade war thing means for us here in Toronto, specifically our real estate, of course.
Yeah.
Everyone's got that 2018 dip in the back of their minds,
Mm.
Toronto's biggest price drop since 2009. So are we in for a repeat, a blip, or
Mm.
something even bigger? I'm really glad we've got you here today to help us break it all down. You've got this knack for taking complex economics and making it, well, make sense for the rest of us.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, Brad's report is dense, no doubt about it, but I think we can pull out the key takeaways that are most relevant to your investments, specifically here in Toronto, and maybe hopefully put some of those concerns to rest.
Exactly. So I guess to start, maybe we should just acknowledge the elephant in the room. We're talking about a trade war between Canada and the U.S. Two countries that, let's face it, are pretty deeply intertwined economically.
Absolutely. We often forget just how much trade flows between our two countries. We're talking trillions with a T, dollars in goods and services every year. So
Yeah.
yeah, any disruption to that flow has a huge potential impact.
Okay, wow, trillions. So how do these tariffs actually work? Like, what's the mechanism there?
Yeah.
And what does it really mean for, say, a developer here in Toronto?
Okay, so imagine you're a developer,
Yeah.
right? And you're building a new condo downtown. You
Yeah.
need lumber, steel, appliances, all that stuff. Well, thanks to these tariffs, every time those materials cross the border from Canada into the US, they basically get hit with this extra fee,
Right.
an extra cost. And guess what? Those costs, they get passed down the line. So suddenly your lumber's more expensive, your steel's more expensive, and your overall construction costs go up, which of course eats into your profit margins.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see how that would hurt. And it's not just the big developers, right? This impacts renovators, contractors, everyone in the construction chain.
Yeah, exactly. It's a ripple effect. And then you layer on top of that this uncertainty, businesses get spooked when they don't know what the rules are going to be next month, next year. They hold back on investments, hiring slows down, and then the whole economy starts to feel the squeeze.
That's like this domino effect almost.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if I'm a developer in Toronto and I don't know if the price of steel is going to skyrocket next month, I'm probably thinking twice about starting that new condo project.
Yeah, you got it. And that hesitation, that's what really starts to slow things down. And, we're not just talking about construction here. Think about the whole ecosystem around real estate. Realtors, mortgage brokers, even furniture stores. Everyone feels the pinch when the market slows down.
Right, right. And it's not just anecdotal, right?
Mhm.
Brad's report cites some pretty sobering figures from the Bank of Canada. They're predicting this trade war could shave 1.5% off of Canada's GDP.
Right, 1.5%. That's significant, And they're even talking about a potential decline in our standard of living. I mean, think about it. If the economy shrinks and prices go up, all those things we take for granted, infrastructure projects, public services, they all start to get squeezed.
Yeah, that's a bit scary, actually. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the will house prices go up or down debate, but it sounds like this trade war could impact our lives in ways we haven't even thought of yet.
Absolutely. It's about the bigger picture. This isn't just about real estate. It's about our quality of life,
Right.
here in Toronto, across Canada. And that's why it's so important to really understand what's going on, what the potential impacts are, so we can make informed decisions.
Okay, so let's bring it back to Toronto real estate specifically. Brad's report highlights that even before this trade war drama started heating up, things were already cooling down here. Sales were down, listings were up, prices were dipping slightly. What was driving that?
Well, Toronto's market, it's not operating in a vacuum, right? We've got rising interest rates globally. That's making it more expensive for people to borrow money, to buy a house. And then there's just this general sense of, I don't know, uneasiness about the economy. People are hesitant to make big purchases when they're not sure what's around the corner.
I guess it makes sense. If you're worried about your job or, what your grocery bill is going to look like next month, buying a house suddenly seems a lot less appealing.
Yeah, it's basic psychology. When things feel uncertain, people tend to, hold on to their cash. And that has a direct impact on demand in the housing market.
Okay, so you've got rising interest rates, economic jitters, and now this trade war piling on. Not exactly a recipe for a booming real estate market, is it?
No, not exactly. And then you have to factor in the unique dynamics of Toronto's market. We've got this chronic lack of supply that's been driving prices up for years. Now throw in all this uncertainty, and it gets really tricky to predict what's going to happen.
So on the one hand, you've got these forces that could potentially push prices down. But on the other hand, you've got this limited supply that could act as a buffer. It's a real tug of war, isn't it?
It is. It is. And that's why you can't just look at historical trends or, rely on gut feelings. You've got to really dig into the nuances, the specific factors at play in the Toronto market. And that's what Brad's report does so well.
Yeah, he really does break it down. So, okay, let's talk specifics. Construction costs. Brad estimates that these tariffs could add another, 10% to 15% to the cost of building materials in Toronto?
Right, right.
So those increased costs, they obviously get passed on to the consumer.
Yeah.
And that could lead to, even higher home prices, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But didn't we just say that demand might be cooling down? How does that all play into it? That's what
Yeah.
makes this situation so interesting, right? We've got these potential higher prices because building is more expensive, but then maybe people just won't buy as much because they're worried about the economy. It's kind of like, will anything even move?
So are we talking like prices stay flat even though it's costing more to build? Is that even possible?
It could be, yeah. And that's where things get really interesting for anyone who's investing. We keep hearing Toronto housing always in demand, but if that actually protects it from a price drop this time, does that make it a safe bet? Or just like a different kind of risk? Instead of crashing, maybe it just grows super slow or takes forever to sell anything.
It's almost like instead of a crash, we got to worry about things just freezing up.
Exactly. And this is where Brad's work really comes in handy. He's not just saying market up, market down. He's looking at the pieces inside, like condos versus detached houses, how each neighborhood's different, that kind of thing.
So it's not enough to just know if prices overall are going up or down. You got to think about what kind of property, where it is, all that on top.
Right, exactly. And there's even more to it than just prices. Brad's report talks about jobs too, like manufacturing and agriculture. Those could take a hit from this trade war.
Oh, right. If people in those industries start losing their jobs, that's going to hurt the whole economy, including people wanting to buy houses.
Exactly. And then there's interest rates, which are always kind of unpredictable. The Bank of Canada, they might try to cut rates even more, to boost the economy.
Wouldn't that be good for buyers, though? Lower rates mean smaller mortgage payments.
In the short term, yeah, maybe. But lower rates can also cause inflation, which means everything costs more. So you got to be careful. Brad's report, it actually warns that cutting rates might help now, but make things worse later on.
So to have a temporary fix, not really solving the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one more thing people forget. This trade war, it won't hit everywhere the same. Some parts of Canada are going to feel it way worse than others, depending on what industries are there, how much they depend on the U.S.
So for our listeners here in Toronto, that means knowing where your investment is specifically is super important. A condo downtown might be a whole different story than like rental property in the suburbs.
Absolutely. You got to understand what's going on locally. And that's where having someone like Brad, who really knows Toronto, is so helpful. He can tell you the risks and the chances you're facing just for your situation.
Makes sense. Now, before we move on, I know a lot of Brad's clients are interested in industrial real estate here in Toronto. What's the trade war going to do to that side of things?
Industrial real estate, it's always vulnerable when trade gets messed up. Think about manufacturing, warehouses, trucking, all that. They depend on stuff moving across borders.
And if those businesses start struggling, that's going to hit the real estate they use.
Exactly. Like if companies don't need as much storage space because they're making or selling less, suddenly there's empty warehouses everywhere. And new building projects, those probably get put on hold.
So for anyone owning industrial property here, that's got to be a worry. Harder to find tenants, maybe rent goes down.
It's definitely something to consider, but this is where Brad's research is so useful. He's pointed out parts of the industrial market that might do okay even with this trade war going on. Like businesses that mostly sell within Canada, they're probably less affected.
So it's not like the whole sector is doomed. There might be some bright spots, even with all this going on.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to stay informed and to talk to experts like Brad. He can help you figure out this complicated situation and give you advice that fits your goals and how much risk you're comfortable with.
That's great advice. We've covered a lot today, haven't we? This trade war, it really throws a curveball into Toronto real estate, which is already complicated enough as it is.
It does.
But it sounds like there are ways to handle the risks, maybe even find some good opportunities in all this uncertainty. And that's what I like about Brad's report. It doesn't just lay out the problems. It tries to give you some answers, too.
Yeah, it's about giving you the knowledge and understanding you need to make smart decisions, especially when things are changing so fast. Because when you know what's going on, you're in a better position to deal with it.
Okay, so let's sum up the key things for everyone listening. Number one, this trade war, between Canada and the U.S., it's a big deal. It could really shake up the Canadian economy, and that includes the Toronto real estate market.
Right. We might see construction costs jump because of these tariffs, which could mean higher home prices. But at the same time, people might not be as eager to buy because they're worried about the economy overall.
Right, so it's a push and pull in both directions. And we also have to think about those potential job losses, interest rates changing, who knows how, and the fact that this trade war won't affect every place the same way.
And don't forget, Toronto's market is already kind of unique, with not enough homes being built and lots of people wanting to buy.
It's a lot to take in. But the good news is we don't have to figure it out alone. Brad's put together this fantastic report that explains it all, and it's specifically focused on Toronto. It's got all the numbers, the analysis, and even what he thinks people should do, whether they're buying, selling, or investing.
It's really essential reading for anyone who's involved in Toronto real estate.
Absolutely. And if you're feeling lost or not sure what to do, just reach out to Brad directly. He's the expert. He can help you understand all this and make the right choices for you. That's what he's there for.
He can make sense of it all.
Exactly. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into how this U.S. trade war could affect Toronto real estate. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week with another interesting topic. Until then, keep learning and keep investing wisely.
Yeah, it really is a lot to think about. But you know what? Maybe instead of panicking, let's just take a step back and remember that Toronto real estate, it's been through ups and downs before, right? I mean, look back at 2018, we had that price dip, and everyone thought the sky was falling.
Right, yeah. People were predicting a crash.
Exactly. And what happened? The market bounced back.
It did, yeah. Pretty quickly, too.
Right. So Toronto's market, it's resilient. You know, it's weathered storms before, and there's reason to believe it can do it again. You know, we've got a strong local economy, unemployment's low, and of course we still have that chronic housing shortage.
True. I guess those are all good signs, but this trade war, it feels different. You know, it's like a global thing. Can Toronto really escape that?
That's a fair point. But here's a question to think about. What if Toronto's market is kind of protected from a big price crash, you know, because there just aren't enough homes for everyone who wants one? Does that make it a safe investment in these crazy times? Or does it just mean the risks are different? Like maybe prices don't plummet, but growth is super slow, or it takes forever to sell a property.
So instead of asking, will prices crash, maybe the question is, how is this trade war going to change Toronto real estate in the long run?
Exactly, because even if prices don't totally tank, this trade war could still have a lasting impact, you know? It could change who has more power, buyers or sellers. It could make certain types of properties more popular. It could even change whole neighborhoods.
That makes sense. And that's where Brad's expertise is so valuable, right? He's not just throwing data at us. He's explaining what it all means, connecting the dots, and giving advice that's specific to Toronto.
Exactly. His report, it really digs deep into different scenarios, analyzes how different types of properties and neighborhoods might be affected, and even gives recommendations for what buyers, sellers, and investors should do.
I like how he doesn't sugarcoat things either. He talks about the risks, the potential downsides, and helps you prepare for different outcomes.
Absolutely. It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's about giving you the knowledge and tools to make smart choices based on what's really happening. Because knowledge is power, especially when things are uncertain.
So for anyone listening who's feeling a little overwhelmed by all this trade war talk, don't freak out. Take a deep breath, read Brad's report, and reach out to him if you have any questions. He's here to help you through it.
He's your guide in these uncharted waters.
Well said. And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic. Until then, stay curious, and as always, invest wisely.